Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Friday Elevate.Strategy Leadership Live, brought to you on Friday from Toronto, Canada. And if you're here live today, feel free to drop a note in the comment section about where you are. It'd be great to know where you're from. If you're post-production, no problem at all. Ping me afterwards, and also my guest today. But it's Friday here, and it's again one of my favorite days of the week because it's Friday, but also because I get a chance to reach out to you and to talk to my guests. So, for those of you who don't know, of tuning in for the first time, or if you know and you want to be reminded, the series here is called Elevate.Strategy Leadership Live Unplugged. And it's slowly become that way because over the months that I've had guests on, a lot of really interesting personal journey stories have come out that it really just feels like, for some guests, it's been the first time they've talked about some of the journey experiences that they had. So it's been really great that way. And the reason for this series was really because on LinkedIn, as many of you know, there aren't really a whole lot of stories from people talking about their careers and kind of some of the difficulties they've gone through. And I started this really because a lot of my clients, and I'm an executive coach, a lot of my clients have been impacted by COVID, or they're in transition and they just kind of sometimes feel like they're going alone by themselves. And hearing other people's stories, you might say misery loves company, but oftentimes so does victory, right? Victory loves company too as well. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest today. It's a departure from some of the themes that I've had in the past, which are business related, corporate kind of suits, entrepreneurship. Although today's guest is an entrepreneur in her own right too. So I'm going to introduce her now with her official bio. So her name is Dana Levinson, and she is a recognized television news personality with over 20 years in broadcast journalism and information programming. Her career spans from an internship at CBS National News in New York City to 20 years anchoring and reporting at CTV News Toronto, which is where I'm from, obviously, to host of her own podcast now, OnTheDL, which is found in every major podcast platform. In July 2019, Dana left her news position to discover her next chapter and explore the media industry. And this is where, I'd love to hear her story about that. Dana's journey has brought her back to her TV roots, where she is currently hosting two weekly shows on CTV, which is a Toronto or national sort of a television station. Ask a Lawyer, that's seen weekly on CP24 Breaking News, and Things to Know TO, seen weekend mornings on CTV. Dana has interviewed some of the biggest names in politics, entertainment, sports, and health and education, including Kawhi Leonard, Wayne Gretzky, Sarah Jessica Parker, Martin Short, Richard Branson, and Dave Asprey, who is the owner of Bulletproof Coffee Inc. in Toronto here. Dana has been on an air contributor to CTV's Canada AM, Your Morning, The Social News Channel, and CP24 Breaking News. Among many other accomplishments, Dana appears in the new Star Trek series, Strange New Worlds, and is cast in the major motion film, The Marsh King's Daughter. So that's exciting too. Dana is a national ambassador for the Universal Women's Network. She is extremely proud to be featured as one of Canada's top 100 inspiring women of the year in the new book, Women Driving Change. And so without further ado, here she is. Dana, thank you for coming on.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we were supposed to chat a couple of weeks ago, and I had to postpone on you because you had laryngitis. And I
I
had a few
did, yes.
people reach out afterwards and say they were quite disappointed, but then they heard they were coming on.
Oh,
So
oh, that's nice. Thank you. I'm. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry. As uh, an on-air person and broadcaster, I felt even. I've gone to work in the past with a cold and a raspy voice, but nowadays I just feel that it's not cool. And I know that this was, we're not face to face, but there was just something about it that I felt was just wrong as I was
right.
coughing but no COVID, so that was all good. Just laryngitis.
Yeah, I was concerned about that when you told me the
Yeah.
night before because of the fact that there are a number of cases that were around at that
Hmm.
point. So,
Yes.
but I'm glad you're back well, and I know that
Thank
you
you.
are running your own podcast, which has been really successful. So putting that on pause must have been difficult as well. But I just wanted so my audience is global. I have a global reach. A lot of my
Beautiful.
clients are global, and they may not know about much about yourself or even our TV stations in Canada, which is fine. but it's not every day that my clients get to meet someone who's from the industry in that regard. So if you don't mind just kind of explaining or kind of telling the audience what it is that you do right now, what was your past, and especially now, what is your role today in what you're doing right now? That'd be great.
Certainly, absolutely. So I worked in television news for almost 20 years as a general news reporter and fill-in anchor and a weather anchor.
Okay.
And that's at CTV News, or CTV News Toronto, as it's known to our Toronto audience here, and also formerly called CFDO News. Uh, and involved in the company as a contributor to, as you had mentioned, to various news programming, information programming shows. And I did that for, as I said, almost 20 years. And there was a point prior to a decision that I had made to leave CTV, and it was years in the making, where I felt that I needed a change. And not that I wanted to leave the industry, but I needed a change there. And it just wasn't happening, and it was of no fault of anyone's. It was just the
Hmm.
change wasn't happening, and I needed it. And by the time I got to the point where I had decided to leave, there was no going back. I needed to keep going forward because I felt that I had hit a professional ceiling. And very similar to every other business and industry, people get to a point where they have been in a place, in a position where they need more challenge, and they need
Right.
to turn the page and keep going. And so I felt that that was where I was at. And with a ton of consideration and a lot of planning and a lot of support, I
Right.
made the decision to leave my big, beautiful TV family. Um, and so I left there in end of June, beginning of July of 2019,
Right.
with huge aspirations of creating something, but I wasn't sure how it was going to live or what space it was going to live in or on. I
Right.
had no idea. And that took some time. And On the DL was created as an online show. And then COVID hit. So I wasn't allowed to meet with people face to face, and I really did love the idea of still having an interview show. I created a studio space in my home, and all of that came to a grinding halt very quickly.
Right.
And
Right.
so, but then I decided that the entrepreneur in me was not going to lay down and take it like the rest of the world or many people in the world. And notwithstanding, that is exactly where most people should have been. But I had a fire in me and a timeline. And I didn't care that there was a pandemic, and I recreated and I reimagined how it would look. And so we began the podcast, and I aligned with some incredible producers and people that believed in the vision that I had around interviewing and conscious communication, where there was storytelling, but it was also helping people with their journeys. And I felt at the time, people never needed it more. People needed conversations that would resonate, information that would help them feel better, live their life the way everybody was living, which was in isolation. And they were turning to their computers, their handhelds, their TVs. They needed to consume, and I wanted to be a part of the consumption in a way that I felt that would be the most impactful. So
Right.
that's how On the DL was born, and it's been wonderful. And I've had extraordinary guests
Hmm.
and met incredible people who have shared so much of themselves, and I'm sure you can attest to it too. People, when they share it and they tell their stories, they really do help others and help others with their journeys, whether it's a work journey or a health journey or both.
Yeah.
Um, and then this past September, I don't want to say I reconnected because I never disconnected. I have stayed quite close to my TV family at CTV. And a phone call came in about uh, a, a potential opportunity where they felt that the time was right, and the relationship was there, and I decided was right for me to take that opportunity. I hesitate when I say the word go back, because I left my position there. I never felt as if I had left. My heart was always there, and I
Right.
had never had the I never had the idea that I would be really anywhere else. It was really about finding my place on my own and where
Right.
I was going to land. So
Right.
that's, yeah. So I choose my words correctly in regards
Yeah.
to saying, oh, I went back. I just
Yeah.
felt that I had taken my space, and now I'm in a great uh, position where I feel like I'm flourishing and using my skills the way I've
Hmm.
wanted to, and very grateful, exceptionally grateful to be there.
Right. So I've listened to a number of your podcasts, and I certainly can attest to the fact that you've got some very interesting guests on, some
Thank
very
you.
interesting topics. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed them. And what's amazing is that when you have a good chemistry dynamic with your guests, there's a lot more. There's a lot more than just that topic that comes out, right? There's a lot more personal things
Yeah.
that come out,
Yeah.
and that's very refreshing because there's an authenticity there that, quite frankly, we don't really quite often get, even sort of in the mainstream media. For example, there's the news and information piece of it that people need to know, but then there's
Of
no
course.
opportunity to kind of connect and have that fireside piece, right? So yeah, no, I really enjoy
Yes,
your
that's the
podcast. So,
point. Yes, that's the point of the show. I'm so happy that's your takeaway, because that is exactly the point of it.
mhm,
News is always going to be important, and that's information that we need. But this is another side of information programming. It's a creative, more candid way of getting the information and having somebody tell their personal story and
mhm,
connecting with the topic so others can connect to it too.
right. And I think you have to have a certain kind of personality to do that too. I mean, it's not, you know, if you have a broadcast bent, you may not have the personality that still wants to have that connection with people.
Right.
And you may
Yes.
have a connection with people, but you may not have, you may be shy to be in front of the camera, much like, I was probably 3 years ago when I first started to coach. And, I think there's something to be said about the vulnerability of live, and the sense that it's not scripted, in that it's almost like having, kind of peeking into people's, like, casual conversation, right, which you often learn a lot
Absolutely.
more from the nuances, right?
Absolutely. I love it. I
So
love it.
yeah, so I applaud you for that. And so let me just go back then to the beginning of kind of your decision around careers, right? So
Sure.
if you wouldn't mind sort of going back as far as you like to, and just kind of
Mhm.
walking us through, like, what made you make certain decisions around. I looked at your bio, and you studied in this area of journalism, I think, as a base of kind of what you went into. But you know was there influences in your life earlier on where you said, I wanted to do that particular thing, and then decisions that you made sort of next day? Would you mind kind of walking us through a little bit about that?
For sure. That's a great question. I have a background in during my childhood, because it's a long time ago. My background was in theater and acting, and I
Mm,
knew that I wanted to do something in performing, but I didn't know what that would be if it wasn't acting. And I love academics, and I loved English, and I loved writing and reading
right.
and communicating, and journalism seemed to be the right fit. But journalism was not on my radar just yet as I was doing my undergrad. The Gulf War hit.
Oh, wow.
So I
Okay.
don't, and I was glued to CNN, literally glued to CNN for 72 hours. And I said,
Right.
that is what I want to do. I want to be
Hmm.
out there, and I want to be connecting with people, and I want to bring that back. Now, I mean, being an international correspondent was a completely different journey. And I did think of that when I was much, much younger. It didn't happen that way. I'm very happy the journey I've been on, but I did have aspirations to get overseas and report, but
Right.
it just didn't work out that way. So that was a huge turning point for me, where I started looking into journalism and into different programs and what would work and how I could marry the two passions that I had for communication and for performing. And it just, broadcast journalism seemed to be it. And that was
Right.
the big influence for me.
Right. When you were saying that acting and theater was one of your passion, was there something that influenced that even further back to say that, you had a favorite movie or show or something like that that kind of inspired you to want to? Were you always sort of a performer, or how did that work out?
I was always a performer. I loved being on stage since I was 9 years old. I loved just to be acting and singing and be in front of people, and it was where I found my freedom and I found my confidence. But as I grew older and became a teenager and continued to do that, but then realizing that I also wanted to utilize a part of my brain somehow, which meant like it meant university. In my family, that's what it meant, right?
Hmm.
So it was sure you want to go off to New York and go to Broadway, you can do that, but you have to go and get your undergrad first. That
Right.
was the rule. And as soon as I got to university, I fell in love with academics and university, and I wanted to be, for me, I wanted to be in a place always where I was utilizing my brain, notwithstanding and acting for sure you do, but I was a child when I was doing that. So it's a much different as I was younger than my children are now when I was
Right.
doing that.
Right.
So it was just one of my first influences. In terms of movies, gosh, I loved all the musicals when I was a kid. Um, The
Do you have
Sound
a
of
favorite?
Music was my favorite. Yeah, that The Sound of Music was my favorite movie growing up. I loved it. And then of course, when I got much older and I watched movies like Fame, those kind of movies I loved
Right.
in terms of musicals and stuff. But um, I was very influenced by arts. I loved all the creative side of it, and I still do. I just somehow wanted to be in a profession where I was utilizing my brain every day to a point of almost exhaustion.
Okay.
And I will tell you that the grind of news gave me that. I
Hmm.
loved it. I love that you're just constantly using your brain. You're constantly out there and getting the information and then tying it all together and bringing it for broadcast is a whole different level. And I loved it. I just loved it.
Gotcha. Um, when you say using your
Sorry, you just froze
brain,
there.
sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, you just froze there. Yeah, sorry, you just froze there.
Okay, one of the streams. No problem. Okay. No, so I was just asking, when you first got into the field of journalism,
Hmm.
what was the most difficult part of that? And what was the most surprising part of that?
I'm going to tell you a great story. This is fun. The first day at CFTO, because it was formerly called CFTO News before it was CTV News Toronto. Uh, so I was there the first day. They put me on air right away, but I was live from the newsroom. And so I wasn't as intimidated. But the next day, I was called early in the morning from our assignment editor, and he said that a camera person was going to pick me up at my house and was going to take me to a fire scene. And I was
Okay.
going to report live for the noon news. And this wonderful camera person picked me up. And of course, I had never met him before. And he introduced himself and he said, "Welcome, welcome to news, welcome to local news. I'm just going to give you a little bit of advice." I said, "Sure." He said, "Local news is like war. You go to the bathroom and you eat when you can, and you don't wait until you are told. So if you're hungry, eat something. If you need to go to the bathroom, go, because you're not going to get another opportunity."
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was shocked by that.
Okay.
It was as it as glamorous as anyone thinks news reporting is. It is the complete opposite of that.
Okay.
It
Okay.
is not glamorous at all. The wonderment of it is that everybody in front of the camera makes it look so flawless and they make it look so glamorous, but it's not. So that was a huge I was really shocked by that. I was shocked by the extraordinary level of professionalism of the people I was around every single day.
Hmm.
I was blown away by how people worked, how quickly they worked, how efficiently they worked, how professional they were. And I said, I want to be just like them when I grow up. So it was, it was
Gotcha.
like, okay, I got to grow up really quickly because I got to keep up. And it was a
Right.
huge opportunity, and it was really an extraordinary thing at the beginning. And then you become part of the family and become one of them, and you realize that you are keeping up and you are doing your part and you are in the grind. So all of that is all of that was shocking, but it is the best training in the world. Local news reporting is like being a soldier, and it is the best training in the world for every and any profession. I feel I can wear any hat
Right.
at any time.
Yeah. Well, I can only imagine because, I've seen, in doing the research coming up here, I saw that the farewell interview that before you left the station, not okay, leaving, like, careful with the
The
words.
newsroom, yeah, yeah,
The
yeah,
newsroom,
yeah, for
right,
sure.
was they showed a montage of like various
Mm,
kind of clips that you did, right? And it's just amazing the broad spectrum of things that you do, right? As far as like coverage and sometimes like with levity and sometimes not so happy, things that are happening. So, but let me ask you, what is the most challenging part of that grind then? Is it a matter of, what if it's a topic that's heavy to you, right? If it's weighty on your
mhm,
mind, like
mhm.
what is that the grind that tell me about that experience on your mind, on your heart, or is it, I know it's physically taxing as well.
Mhm, mhm. Uh, the grind, when we speak about the grind in TV news, it's really about it's the day-to-day get up and go, and you're really running. You really are running um, all day long, from one interview to the next interview, from one scene to the next scene, because you need all the elements to put a story together properly and to bring the most accurate and best information every single time. And you have to lead with that every day when you wake up. That is the reason to go to
Right.
work.
Right.
So that's where the grind begins.
Hmm.
um, I think that part was and it will always be a challenge for people. Like for me, when you start in it, you take it, you almost feel as if you do not have a choice. This is the job, this is what
Right.
you do.
Right.
And
Right.
it's almost I don't want to call it an addiction, it's wrong, but there is a rush to it
Okay.
that
Right.
for me, there was such a rush to it, knowing that I would wrap up for the day after one of the newscasts, after whatever final newscast, whether it was the 6 o'clock newscast or the 11:30 newscast. I knew that I did something important, even if it was a super happy story or super sad story, or if it was live on scene from an explosion or an election. It didn't matter what it was. There was always a sense that there was a sense of accomplishment. So for
Right.
me, the grind was just part of it, but that feeling of accomplishment every day was part of it too. It is
Right.
when the accomplishment felt the exact same every day where I knew I needed a change, if that
Right.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're
But
constantly looking for a challenge. Yeah. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and it's like any job, right? You're a lawyer, you litigate, you go to work every day, but you have
Mhm.
different cases. So your different cases are often what makes the work different. It's the same
Right.
with reporting. You have a different story every day, so it helps spice up your day. But for me, I didn't want to report anymore. I didn't want to be a news reporter anymore, but I wanted to do something where I'd be able to get the information out.
Right. Yeah,
So
and that's,
hosting and interviewing is still very much part of my life.
yeah, because I think you're curious by nature.
Yes,
Um,
it's very, you got it. I am very curious by nature. I would
yeah.
ask somebody anything at this point. Yeah.
And that's, in a similar way, a lot of my clients um, can't really sometimes pinpoint what it is. They just know that they need out, and or maybe the situation is such that the way that they behave because of a motivation that they don't understand is causing them stress at work, which then leads to a poor relationship with their boss, which then leads to maybe being laid off, right? And when you
Oh, that's
sort of
bad.
peel back the layers, it really comes down
Yeah.
to what is the passion that you have? Like, what is it that you want to do today in this part of your career that makes the most impact, right? So I always ask people when I'm coaching, you need to be where you're supposed to be, right? And where you're supposed to be
Mm.
is where you have the most impact at that point in your life, given all the skills that you have. And it's when you feel that it's sort of a disjoint between, what you can do and what you're actually able to get, impact. That's probably where dissatisfaction starts to happen, right? And yeah, so I can completely relate to that. Let me ask you about the journey then in your career in journalism, right? Um, what were some, did you have any, it's not a linear path. Nothing is ever a linear path. So were there sort of forks in the road that kind of come to mind where you had to make really difficult decisions about certain, I mean, maybe within the same industry, but sort of having the tension between maybe going one path versus another. Like, tell me about that journey and the not the struggle, but like the progress, I guess.
Well, I mean, I was with the same company for 20 years.
Yeah.
So there weren't a lot of forks, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, it was really the same position. The only time where I struggled was back in 2010. My manager at the time felt that where I would shine the most was doing the weather anchoring on the weekend, still being able to report during the week, but that I would be doing weather on the weekend. And I didn't feel like that was going to be a good choice for me.
Okay.
And I made it quite clear. Um, that being said, he felt that was the right choice for me. So that's where I was going. And that's where I stayed. And so
Right.
there was there was something about that decision where I think back now, had I said no, had I left and gone to another competing station, because at the time, other local, I can't speak to the climate now, but the climate then was, oh, wait, well, I'm leaving and I'm going to go and see if I can get a job at one of the other local stations,
Right. Right.
um, because I don't like this decision. But I decided not to do that. One, because I was always so grateful to be there. And I have to tell you the truth, I was a little complacent. It was a little too safe.
Yeah.
So I just stayed. And it was with the understanding that I would be in that position for a short period of time, but 9 years later, I was still there in
Right.
that position. So that was one of the reasons where I said I have to make a move because I don't want to
Hmm.
keep doing this.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so that was a huge fork, and it was really based on um, a personal need to survive. I was a single mother with two very young children at the time. I think by then, I was a single mom in 2008 with a 1 and a 4-year-old, two little
Wow.
boys. And
Okay.
so 2010, they weren't that much older, and I needed the stability of a set schedule. So there I had it. I had Saturday to Wednesday. I knew I was working Saturday and Sunday nights, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I could have Thursday, Fridays off usually, to be real, like to do the mummy things that I couldn't normally do when I was on a news reporter schedule, which was really almost a 24-hour clock. And it was on 7 days, off 1 day, on 8 days, off 2 days. It was just a crazy schedule.
Hmm.
So that was the biggest decision up until when I decided to make the change in 2019. And
Right.
now I'm sort of at a place where the opportunities are are there now. And now I have to make choices as to where I want or where I see myself fitting in that work for me professionally and for my lifestyle and for um, all the work that I have done on myself
Hmm.
in the last 2.5 years, because I've done a lot of work around,
Yeah. Sure.
especially those words: complacency, gratitude, vulnerability. All of those things were not part of my vocabulary.
Right.
I
Right.
just, I wasn't in touch with really
Right.
what I needed. I knew what I wanted. I
Yeah.
just didn't know what I needed.
Right.
And now I
Yeah.
know. Hmm.
And so there's a lot of things that I want to ask about that, and I won't ask all of
Sure.
them, but But I did want to say that the complacency element of things is very interesting, because no matter what, career you take on, there inevitably gets to the point where you're kind of at the top of your game, and you kind
Mm.
of, you're kind of there, and you got to make some choices now, as far as sometimes opportunities are given to you, not to you per se, but to people in general. And then they have to make a decision, and that decision will sort of almost like cast them back to coming straight out of university, right? Where they don't know what they're going to be doing in that new role. I have a client that just came on uh, 2 days ago, and he said that he was going from a senior role to a more senior role, but it was different. And you'd look on paper, it would make a lot of sense, okay, this transition. But his key point was that he was just scared. He was scared about what the expectation was going to be. But for the first time in like 30 years, he's forced himself to do something different. And now he's there. What do I do now? So it's the work that you said that had to be done first for him to prepare for that role. So
Well, fear is, it's you have to really take a step back and ask yourself what you really are afraid of, really.
right.
And if you're not where you want to be and you're still dreaming big, it's fear is probably what is holding you back.
Okay.
Make that phone call, send that email, be present, be engaging, all of those things that you probably are saying, I can't do that, or yes, I think I've done the most. You haven't done it yet. You haven't done it yet, because along with complacency, imposter syndrome is also hand in hand with that,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
I'm not good enough. I can't do that. I have to stay here. We do a lot of the self loathing and self doubting when we become complacent too. We make excuses.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah,
I have
yeah.
a I have a friend of mine here. He's a professor of mine. So Madi Malik, thanks for
Hi,
tuning in, man.
Madeep. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining. I just read your comment. That's nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think see what you're saying now, and how you're saying it is exactly why I started this sort of broadcast in March. And like,
Beautiful.
to be honest, Dana, I think, a lot of times some of my best ideas, not intentional at all, but have turned out to be okay ideas, have come in the most strangest times. Like, they're usually when I'm working out, but sometimes even when I'm,
Me too.
just waking up or something, just. And I thought, like, when I first came out coaching, it was a really big step for me, because I was leaving a salary position for 20 years that I'd been part of, and into a role where I don't have any accredit. I have no credits to my name, but I have failure. I have a lot of failure. I gave a TED talk last year about that. And it was through my failures that I've eventually sharpened to the point where I know this is where I need to be, because everything else I've failed at and I've tried hard. So it's a different journey for me. But to step out of salary and become sort of an entrepreneur, try to build your own client base for coaching, was scary. But I think what it was is exactly what you're saying is, there is that imposter syndrome is, exactly what qualifies me to be a coach. And there's also the fear of what happens to my salary, my income. And I have 3 young kids, right? I have 3 young kids, a wonderful wife, but 3 young kids. And putting food on the table is, like, I'm almost 50 years old, and sort of like, is it a midlife crisis? I don't know. I don't know how to define that. Um, but yeah, I mean, once you take that step, there's a lot of, like, turns that happen that you don't expect, and many of them are not very good, but some of them are just, tremendously surprising, and they're very delightful, right? um, which leads me to ask you then, so when you were exiting at that point in your career, the TV world, and going into the next, what factors did you consider in planning out what you do next? What was
Yeah,
important to you, as far as, like, to,
I
come.
love that you just asked that. I love that you asked that, because I always want the opportunity when I'm talking about my decision to make a change. They, I always want to talk about the plan, because I don't want people to ever listen to my story and quit their job. That would be the worst thing that anyone could do. Let me just say that right now. Don't go quit your job. You need your job. You need to have an income,
Too
and
late
you
for me.
need.
It's
Well,
too late for
okay. Well, I would have said to you, do not quit your job. You need to have an income. Um, you have to do a lot of planning, and really, it starts
right.
with
Right.
the first conversations, which may be the person you share your life with, your partner, I would say would be the first conversation to have a plan. If you
Right.
don't have a life partner, uh, it would be your financial partner, which is either your financial planner or your bank, and you need to have that conversation first and foremost. So for me, it was with my life partner, my now husband, and we thought about it for years how it was going to happen.
Hmm.
Um, and there was an opportunity for me to take some money out of the company at the time. So I decided I'm going to take that and
Hmm.
make the change now. And then we planned financially. We were able to put money aside. We really had the plan.
Right.
And then, of course, the next step would be you have to go to your then manager or boss and have the most authentic conversation of your life. The most. There is nothing to lose by being completely transparent and honest because you are leaping into vulnerability like you have never before when you have decided to take that huge step. So for me, that was my third and probably the most important conversation in all of this. And it was emotional. I get emotional just thinking about it. But I believe in my heart 100% because I was vulnerable. I was completely transparent. I spoke the truth in that conversation that I was granted so much respect and so much support from my then boss, who is there now. We have a fantastic relationship,
Hmm.
and the managers around. Everybody was incredibly supportive. Everybody. And so I urge people that when they're in this stage of their careers, if they're thinking about leaving or they're thinking that they need a change, I urge people to go and be as transparent and vulnerable as possible
Yeah.
with whoever it is that they're supposed to speak to, their manager or their boss,
Right.
because you might be delightfully surprised.
Yeah. And often, if you're in that position and mindset for a little while, probably people have noticed some changes in your behavior anyway, right? Begin to sort of think of maybe they're not so interested anymore in what they're doing, just
I don't
because.
know.
You
I
don't
don't
think so?
know. I don't know. I can't speak to other industries. I know for me it was more of fake it till you make it.
Really?
I was on air, right? So I'm not going
Right.
to I would
Right.
never do a bad job ever. It's just
Hmm.
not in my wheelhouse to not perform and give viewers what they want to watch. It was just not,
Right.
and because I loved it. Like lights, camera, action. I love it. So I don't think I don't I can't say I don't think. I would say quite honestly, nobody knew that that's what I was going to do. Most people were
Right.
very surprised. In fact, you talk about midlife crisis. People were thinking I was bananas,
Right.
or
Sure.
they didn't believe me, or they thought that I received a tap on the shoulder and was asked to leave. And that really upset me, actually. That was really ego blowing after I had left, to hear the gossip, both on Twitter and with friends speaking to me and saying, people believe that you were asked to leave, and I said that's not true. Why can't people just see it for what it is? That I am a woman who decided to take control of my life and my career in a way that I felt was the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And now that I've had a voice and I've spoken on many platforms about it, uh, I feel that that is part of my purpose now, is to tell my story over and over again so people can connect to a woman really deciding I can take charge of my career at any stage in my career, whether it's 20 years in, whether it's 40 years in, whether it's 5 years in. You have the space and you have the capacity to do it. You just might need some help in planning to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. Dana, I'm going to ask her like 10 seconds. I'm just going to close my door here because it's really noisy outside. 1 second.
Yeah. Oh, I know all about that. Broadcasting from my basement.
No, no, no. And in preparing for this interview, I felt like I'm going to be the imposter here because I'm interviewing, a veteran. Okay. So, oh,
No
gotcha. So,
imposter, no imposter, no imposter. You got to throw that out. Throw out that imposter syndrome. Just throw
no,
it out. It's so bad for you.
it's easy. It's easy to do with you, Data, because you're too gracious.
Oh,
My,
it's nice
let
of
me
you.
ask you this. So the planning aspect is there, the support from your boss is there, but what kind of factors were saying, um, single words, right? Like thought provoking. That's 2 words with a hyphen. Sure, that's what needs to be there next, right? What are your non-negotiables? Like you said, as a next step, you were planning, but what were things that you aspirationally needed to do more of?
You mean when I was planning my exit?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, what did I need to do more? Um, well, I felt I wasn't being utilized in a way that was challenging enough for me, right? So it worked for the company. It's not
right,
as if they were saying, we don't want you. They were being lovely. They were just saying, we love the role you're in. We love what you do. And what you want to do, there isn't that role for you here. Like when you put all the factors together, which I understood, it wasn't their fault. It wasn't what I wanted. So that's why we all worked together and we stayed close over the last couple of years. And when the opportunity came around, it was the perfect match again. So uh, I guess non-negotiable at the time would have been staying in the exact position that I was in. So I needed to, that was the non-negotiable part. Now for me, I could, I'm up for anything. That's how I
great.
feel. I feel
Okay,
there is nothing too big or too small that I won't do. I'll do it all because I really believe there is the whole next part of my career now. Another 25 years at
yeah,
least. That's how I'm feeling. I'm
yeah,
incredibly energized and inspired to keep going. I don't I don't have the horrible, ageist, not good enough philosophy that some women, unfortunately, and I say women because I can't connect with men because I'm not one, so I can't speak for them, but I can speak for what
sure.
it's like to be a woman. Um, Women getting older, it's actually, I find women post 30s into 40s, into their 50s, into their 60s bring a wisdom that is so incredible. I try to surround myself with women that are older than me all the time because the wisdom that they share and they bring to the table enlightens the work that I do.
Right. I have a question here that came from Mandeep again. So circling back to kind of earlier on what we talked about, is it true that no one will believe what the truth is? Do you think that's why people are not vulnerable?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, I think people are not vulnerable because, yes, they for sure they believe people won't believe them. Um, and that's hard. That's hard on your ego when you feel that people think you're lying. That's a terrible feeling. I also think people aren't vulnerable because they're afraid of what the outcome may be. Um, but what if you're vulnerable, it doesn't matter what the outcome's going to be. It's still going to be a better outcome than if you're not.
Okay. But the vulnerability comes at a cost, right? And that's something that you have to kind of have thick skin for. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. Yes and no. It depends what you're being vulnerable about. If you're
Okay.
talking about having a conversation with your boss about uh, different roles that you want to take, that's a different kind of vulnerability.
Right.
Having vulnerability where you're talking to a complete stranger, like I'm doing now, in front of your client base, people I don't know, talking about my journey, that's a different kind of vulnerability. But whether
Right.
it's received well or it's not received, it's still, for me, it is still a positive experience being vulnerable in this space because maybe there will be one person where this resonates with them,
Right.
right? Maybe there's that one person that will say, wow, that's how I feel. So that's important to me. I feel that it's very purposeful and impactful, and that's how I try to live my life now.
Gotcha. Um, in your current role as the podcaster and gaining the again, your subjects are incredibly interesting, very specific sometimes too. And I wonder, I'm reading the caption of what's coming up, and I'm thinking, what possibly could you talk about here? But your guests are also amazing. So, um,
Thank you.
what are some of the thrills? Like, what are things that really delight you about that? And what are also some of the things that you didn't expect? Maybe there's not enough of that, right? When you started the journey of that.
Well, you hit it exactly. It's the thrill of the conversation every single time. I mean, not all of the interviews are incredible. They're incredible to me. I don't know if they're incredible to my audience or to anybody listening, but the thrill for me is listening to people and their answers just blow me away. They just blow me away. Talk about vulnerability. Some of the
Hmm.
things that come out of people's mouths, it's extraordinary. I'm so grateful that they're sharing that, because at the end of the day, we're human, right? We're all just people, and we have feelings. And most of the conversations that I have are conversations that are not being talked about or said out loud, hence on the DL. And I want those conversations opened up, wide open, so people can start talking about whatever it is that topic is, right? I'm sure there's things that you you probably read the title and read the little blurb and thought, I don't know if I'm gonna listen to this one. And if you did, like some other men that have listened, they have said, wow, that was so educating and very entertaining. And I'm so glad that I listened to that.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no forum for that. That's one of the reasons that I think if more people did what you were doing, and part of the reason why I started this was because of the fact that when people get a platform to kind of in some sense, I always feel like this conversation here with my guests, it's kind of confidential, even though it's not. Like
Yes,
there's a degree of vulnerability there that it's almost
yes,
like we are meeting up for coffee, right? But we kind of know that we're not. But we're okay with that. We're okay with being more
yes.
vulnerable now because we're not talking directly to someone about our story, right? And so, yeah, I think that's amazing. And so these conversations are incredible. Do you have a direction or goal as far as like what you're trying to achieve on the grand arc of things? Like, are you intentionally trying to cover more topics that women don't talk enough about, or kind of more, moving into political realm or whatever it is? Do you have sort of a vision?
Anything, anything.
Anything?
Anything. It is not just women centric. It just happens to be there happens to be a lot of female related topics because that's what interests me. And the feedback that I've received from a lot of women have been, can you please talk about this? Can you please find out more information about this? And I'm like, absolutely, we're going to talk about this. So um, but yeah, I definitely, I mean, I talk about politics. I talk about anything,
Yeah.
anything. There is no topic I won't talk about. There's nothing that won't be uncovered. We'll talk about anything. And really what it's about is the art of being candid.
Hmm.
And so what I used to do as a reporter when I would get on scene and quickly I needed that soundbite. I needed that interview. I needed it fast. I know that when you're engaging in conversation, it's a two-way street. When you throw a mic in front of somebody, I take my microphone and I put it in their face and I ask them questions, you may get the answer you want, and I'm not saying the answer, a answer that is
Hmm.
workable that you could throw on air, or you may not. And sometimes when you have 2 or 3 minutes to do that, you're not always successful. But what I learned early on in my career was that people were the most receptive when I just spoke to them,
Right.
when I just chatted with them and had a conversation. All of that lay somewhere on the floor, on the cutting room floor, because it's news. So you only have a minute and a half to tell a story. It's a news report. You put in your sound bites and your clips of the interview, but you don't put any part of yourself. It's just a scripted
Right.
news report. And the feedback I would get from most people that I worked with was that you need to do more of that. You need to interview. You need to share more of your interviews. And I
Yeah.
thought that would have been a wonderful thing to, share online or on social media, but there wasn't room for that then. There is
Mhm.
now. There wasn't then. So for me, it's the conversation, and I share a little bit of myself every single time. So every single episode on the DL, you may find out something about me. You may already have heard it, but if I have somebody who is going to give me their time and speak with me so genuinely and candidly, the least I could do is to give of myself. And that's what I do. And that's what I think sets apart the podcast from other podcasts. It's not just two women or two people chatting. It's that we're really getting into it. We're really speaking the truth.
Gotcha. Yeah, and again, for those of you who are not listening yet to Dana's podcast, it is available for whatever platform it is that you listen to your podcast on. So it's on the DL, right? That's
Mhm.
that's what they should be looking for. Okay.
But it's on the DL with Dana Levinson. There's another on the DL I saw with two women, but it's obviously not me. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. That's important. I'll put that in the comment section below after our broadcast. But
Okay. Okay.
so as far as the next steps go for what you think are, it's interesting because I do want to ask you. So how did COVID impact what you were going to do? Like, how did you have to change gears? But what was life going to be like if there's no COVID? Was it going to be on the DL but just sooner or different or what
Yeah.
was?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
different. It was an online show without podcast. It was going to live primarily live. We were thinking of doing Facebook Live. At the time, there was Periscope on Twitter. We wanted it to stream live everywhere, and then have the final product live on YouTube. And then my goal was to have the show picked up by Netflix or Prime or Apple or somebody to have an information show around, and it was an interview show,
Mhm.
and then it would become more glamorous and it would be more studio like, and it would look very TV production like. And literally, we just started that February, and then COVID hit in March. So I think
Right.
I had 3 episodes, and then COVID hit, so
And
it
then
was
you
done.
started talking about COVID
And then
every week.
COVID hit, and I remember COVID hit that in the middle of March. And
Yeah.
I remember I put up a post and I said, like many of you, I'm going to go and take care of my family. I have no idea what's next. I just didn't know. And a week later, I received a phone call from a producer who was putting together a daily live Instagram interview show, um, only COVID related, and interviewing an array of experts, doctors, celebrities, and it was worldwide. And I took it. I said, okay. So while
Okay.
people were, making cookies and baking bread and freaking out, I was in complete work mode. Boom, I was in work mode. My kids were
Right.
home doing homeschooling, and I'm doing this. And
Right.
so I got right into the um, live broadcasting and on platforms immediately. And then that sort of started to wind down the first summer of COVID. And we have how many summers have we been? No. So the first summer of COVID. And I took a couple of weeks where I was trying to really reimagine how On the DL was going to look, and how I was going to continue the momentum of health experts and doctors and real people, and help people
Mhm.
in sort of like the health and wellness space. Uh, and I was just constantly thinking and reimagining how it was going to go, and wasn't sure how it was going to go.
Right.
And like you, a lot of stuff comes to me when I'm working out, and I walk. My walks are walking meditation. And one day I opened up LinkedIn, and there was something on LinkedIn, and a light bulb went off, and I made a phone call,
Right.
and that's how it happened. So
Gotcha.
I connected with somebody who had interviewed me a year prior and had said to me, "You need your own podcast." And I said, "Podcast? I'm not going to do a podcast. I'm a TV person." And he's like, "Okay, call me
Yeah.
when you've changed your mind." And I called him, and we have been partners ever since. And he's everything.
Right.
He's everything.
Yeah.
So that's how it happened.
um, so now you're reconnected back to CTV. And
Yes, so I have OnTheDL, which lives weekly. I'm constantly doing interviews, but we release one episode per week, and I love it. And I'm doing it now and continuing to do it on a Zoom platform because one, I'm not having people in studio spaces, restrictions and non-restrictions, and we're just not sure where that's going. And also, I interview people all over the world, so
yeah,
Zoom has been a wonderful platform to use. So I'm doing that, and then I'm at CTV a couple of days a week. So
gotcha.
that's wonderful.
What sort of led you to reconnect with them to go back? Did you miss being in front of the camera and all the dynamics and the think on your feet kind of a thing?
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
100%. I didn't think that I was going to be away from it as long as I was. I mean, it was creating a show, which I thought was going to take off, and then COVID hit, and there was no taking off anything. Everybody was exactly like this. Even people doing the news were at home doing it like this. So it was, I was right there with my TV family, right? Like they were at home too, and I was at home.
right.
But as restrictions started to lift, I was thinking, really I hoped it was as if I was putting it out into the universe that I really wanted to be back in a studio. I just wasn't sure what that studio was going to be.
Right.
And when the phone call came from CTV, I said, yeah, this is perfect. This is
Right.
perfect because I was going home.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well,
Hmm.
Dana, it's coming up to the hour, and I want to honor the time, but I guess I wanted to get your take as someone who is in this field that not a lot of my clients are familiar with, but there's a lot of life lessons to be learned in any part of life, right?
Mm.
What's one thing that you would say to folks who are maybe kind of in their mid to later stage of their career and are trying to make a change? Either it could be sort of staying in the same company and kind of going up the ladder, but not quite sure whether they should do that, or people more often than not kind of wanting to make a complete transition because they've been laid off or whatever it is. Looking back on what you've already done now, jumping out of a very comfort zone into something that's scary and doing something and building something good. What's one or two pieces of advice that you would give to them so that they can keep going on, right?
Okay, I would say be your best advocate. Just
Okay.
advocate. Um, you have to learn how to become an advocate. That's something I'm teaching my children at a young age. I did not have that skill, and
Okay.
I had to teach myself how to become an advocate, my best self advocate. And the other is self confidence. And remember that you are where you are for a reason. If you want more or you want to change, that's on you. But you have to realize that you are in the position you're in because you're worth it. And you've worked really hard to be there. Whether you've lost your job or you're in a job where you want to change, you've 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 arrived. You're there. You just have to take a step back and applaud yourself for
Hmm.
doing it and give yourself a little bit of room to grow where you need to grow.
Right. Yeah. The self advocacy part is something
Huge.
that it's huge. Yeah. And it doesn't come naturally to most people because
No.
for whatever reason, culturally speaking, they're not used to kind of speaking up, or there is that always that fear of rejection, right? That if I
Mm.
advocate for myself, that people will look at me and say, you were never meant for that, you can't do that, and but I think
No, it's
that's
hard.
yeah. And one
No,
of
yeah.
the best things that one of my bosses said to me once was, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? If
Mm.
you don't get, no
I
one
love
knows
it.
that. Um,
Mm.
so anyway, this has been great. Thank you so much, Dan. I have
Lovely.
I have a
Thank
couple of
you.
I have rapid fire questions for you,
Sure.
and
Uh
and and you think I expect no surprises there.
oh. Okay.
So what's your alter ego profession? alter ego profession, if you weren't doing what you're doing now, and you could do whatever you want, really whatever you wanted to do, what would that be?
Oh my God, really?
Like an
Oh my
actor?
goodness.
Uh,
No, I would be a rock star. Like on the stage, like rocking it out. Yeah. With the guitar, like, yeah.
really?
I know, don't laugh. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I love it.
it's a smile of excitement. Yes, not
Yeah.
laugh,
Like I
laughing
wanted
with.
to be Madonna. I love Madonna. People call me Medina because I channel my Madonna. Yeah. I love the stage. Yeah.
It's always the shyest people that allow this. It's funny.
Mm.
It is the case. Okay, and what's
Okay, that threw you.
no, no, no,
That's
no. I'm just
fantastic.
you need to give me some time to process that imagery first of all, and thinking about
Oh gosh. Oh my
because there's
goodness.
association,
Okay.
right? Rock to me means
Good.
something different to someone else. Okay, anyway,
Yeah.
what's one word that you love?
Happy.
Okay,
Happiness.
and like
Yeah.
you're happy now. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. I did love happy. Even when I wasn't happy, I did love the word happy because I wanted it.
Okay, and what's one
Yeah.
word that you hate? You can't say unhappy.
No, I wouldn't say greed.
Greed.
Yes, greed. I don't like
Okay,
greed. Hmm.
in the context of anything in particular.
Anything. I don't
Okay,
like greed. I don't like greedy people. I don't like greed. No.
okay. So generosity would be the opposite there. That's
Exactly. Generous heart, generous people, generous. Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're
uh,
good at this. See, you're good.
you said earlier on that you love all kinds of movies and musicals. What's one book title or movie title that would best describe you?
I have a
I
book
stumped
title.
I stumped the reporter.
Well, a very good friend of mine just wrote a book, and her title, I was like, wow, that totally applies to just about everybody. Um, the title's called Off Script. Marcy Ian. I'm sure you know who Marcy Ian is. Lovely,
Yeah.
beautiful Marcy Ian. And I feel like that's me now. I'm off script, completely off script.
Who do you think defines that script for most of us?
You know, that is individual for sure. For some people, they're defined by their boss, their
Okay.
manager,
Yeah.
and that's how they live. And I would tell people, you are not that. I say that all the time. That role is not who you are, it's who they think you are, and you can change that. Sometimes it's your family.
Hmm.
Sometimes your family defines who you are, uh, but or defines the script that you're supposed to be on or
Right.
saying. But really, it should be you.
Right. Gotcha.
Mhm.
And the last thing, what's one COVID habit or hobby that you developed?
Oh my goodness. Habit or hobby that I developed during COVID? Nothing really changed, to be honest.
Okay, because you were working,
Um,
and you said,
yeah, I worked the whole time. It's not like it's not that well, I did do a lot more cooking, I have to say. I
yeah,
did. Yeah, I did. I did kind of perfect that. And that was really to survive because we needed to eat. And my husband's an emergency doctor. So he was working during
right,
the beginning of COVID. I didn't see very much of him. So, and we have lots of children between us, and we all needed to eat. So there
right,
was, and one of the other skills is I taught my kids how to cook too. My kids
right.
cook. Hmm.
That's great. I was telling a
Yeah.
friend the other day, during COVID, I realized that we had 4 burners on our stove and not 3. So that's how I got familiar with my kitchen.
Are you serious?
No, I was kidding. I was kidding. We do have a sort of a 5th one, right? So the keep warm one, the burner.
Yeah, I have
Anyway,
that too. I have that too.
I had
I
no
have that
idea.
too. The same one. Right. My
Anyway,
husband probably wouldn't know that's a warmer either. It's okay.
Dana, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
It's been
you know,
lovely. What a joy.
yeah, I look forward to seeing and seeing more of you on TV and also hearing your podcast more. And
Thank you.
I'm
Thank you
sure
for
the listeners
supporting
will.
my podcast. Thank you so much. It's lovely of
And
you.
people can follow you after that. What's the best way for them to find you? Like you were saying, Instagram.
So yeah, you could find me on Instagram at Dana Levinson, and I'm Dana Levinson on LinkedIn, and Dana Levinson TV on Twitter.
Okay, gotcha.
And Facebook at Dana Levinson. It's just at Dana Levinson. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Just stay backstage.
Be well. Have a happy holiday.
Yeah. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Wow, that was like as Mandeep said, my guest was saying that was tremendously vulnerable and enjoyable, and I hope that for those of you watching post or even now production, that you would have taken some inspiration out of Dana's career journey. It's certainly something that a lot of elements that I think all of us can relate to, especially the part of fear that really stuck out for me. And also just the idea of, off script at the very end, which is, oftentimes you may feel that your script has been written for you and that you have to stay on track. And I always say to my clients that the easiest route is always to do more of the same, right? And that's, if you think about it, to do more of the same is kind of what people expect you to do because you're really good at that. And you'll get paid more, you'll get more of a senior title. But the harder route, which is sometimes the more passionate and more rewarding route, is to do something that you're not supposed to do according to script. And that's something that hopefully, as if you're one of my clients or if you're in transition right now, that you'll think about that clearly. So anyway, I'll let you guys go, but have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week again. Take care.